I've been carrying around this CD case since middle school, and now I'm going back and listening to all of them. And today we have a big one, I would say a classic of this early to mid 2000s era. It is Green Day's American Idiot. Let's take a listen.
The subliminal mindfuck America. Welcome to a new kind of tension all across the alien mission. Everything isn't meant to be okay.
All right, before I tell you what I think about this album, let's get into a little bit of context and history because, man, this one has a lot of it. If you're not familiar with Green Day, they're a punk band that came out of the Bay Area, started in the late 80s and early 90s, doing a lot of independent releases, stuff on Lookout Records. They had a great album, Kerplunk, that kind of had a lot of buzz in the underground. Eventually, they would break into the mainstream with their 1994 major label debut, Dookie. This album was massive. It was a monster. It had hits like Welcome to Paradise, Longview, Basket Case, so many more just like staple Green Day songs. From then on, the band kind of became alt rock radio darlings. They put out a few more records, 1995's Insomniac, 1997's Nimrod, and 2000's Warning. And again, yeah, these songs had hits on alternative radio, but none of them kind of reached the peaks of Dookie. By the time they got to Warning, sales were declining and the band was kind of at a crossroads. They'd started working on a new album that was going to be called Cigarettes and Valentines, but the tapes got stolen. So the band had to kind of scrap the project and start over. But this ended up being probably the best thing that could have happened for the band because the new material they started to work on became American Idiot. It can't be understated that this album was like a reinvention for the band. It was a new Green Day for a new generation. This is really how I came to know the band. I knew some of the hits before, but this was my first Green Day album that I could really, call my own. They had a whole new look. They were wearing these like black button ups with red ties, lots of eyeliner. This was right in the thick of Hot Topic becoming a major cultural force as well. They called this album a punk rock opera, so it's very ambitious. It has this narrative story of this Jesus of Suburbia character who's kind of making his way through lower middle class American life and the malaise and dissatisfaction he feels with that, along with a slew of other characters. All right, let's not skirt around it. This is clearly a very political album. I mean, it's called American Idiot. You don't really need a poli sci degree to know they're trying to make a statement with this album. And I think that actually requires a little bit more extra context to what was going around in the world at that time. So this album came out 3 years after 9/11. And I know millennials like myself are always mentioning, how 9/11 changed everything for us. It shifted everything. The world changed. And yeah, I mean, it's just kind of true. I think that adds a lot to why this album hit so hard when it came out. After 9/11, the shifts in American culture were jarring. It was almost like overnight. After the terror and trauma of all of us just witnessing this tragedy, the country took a huge swing into just like patriotism. Like you would see American flags everywhere, yellow ribbons tied around trees and fences. You would hear that Lee Greenwood, Proud to be an American song, just like everywhere.
And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me.
I've not really experienced anything quite like that since. The closest parallel I could think of would be COVID, but like the response was quite different, not so united in these states. Of course, this also mirrored the rise of Islamophobia in America. People racially profiling other people for just being perceived as Middle Eastern and Muslim. Really just like terrible behavior all around. So things weren't really all just like peachy and united in the way that people maybe look back on it. I'm going to skip over a lot of history here because there's just too much. So shortly after all of this, the US went to war with Iraq to take down Saddam Hussein under the pretense of weapons of mass destruction. At the time, it was very popular. People were looking for like revenge, retribution. They wanted to defend America and show that we don't take this, from anybody. The only problem was this Iraq thing had kind of nothing to do with 9/11, and no weapons of mass destruction were ever found. So in the years following this, the war became unpopular with a lot of people, as did President George W. Bush. Bush became a controversial figure. He was also kind of like goofy in a way. He would say funny things or misspeak, and people loved to razz him for that.
There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, "Fool me once, shame on you." If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
American Idiot came out 2 months before the 2004 presidential election. in which George W. Bush would end up getting reelected. Green Day's music until this point definitely had its political moments, but this was really them becoming a quote unquote political band. In a lot of ways, I think they've continued to embrace that moniker through today. And back then, being political was actually a very risky move. We're so used today, anyone kind of saying whatever they want on social media. You hear celebrities speak out all the time, artists, musicians, actors. But back then, you were really taking a risk. You had artists who went all in to stand with the president. Toby Keith's "I'll Put a Boot in Your Ass" song, for one, that was a very popular song around that time. But then artists were speaking out, like the Chicks, formerly the Dixie Chicks. They had their careers virtually destroyed for a long time for speaking out directly against President George W. Bush. There were real repercussions here. Nowadays, I think every president gets called an idiot probably every second. But for a band to come out with an album called American Idiot, everyone kind of knowing who that probably is, that's very, very fucking bold. But punk rock has always been political. Green Day might get classified as pop punk and, mainstream, but they grew up listening to bands like Dead Kennedys. I mean, MDC, the band Millions of Dead Cops, they play one of their songs live today. They do their own version of MDC's song Born to Die, changing it from no war, no KKK, no fascist USA to no Trump, no KKK, no fascist USA. Okay, that's a lot of context. Let's get into the album itself. Listening back to American Idiot now, it's really hard to not try and make parallels from then to today. And we'll get to all that. But I remember when I was 14, hearing the song American Idiot for the first time when the music video premiered on TV and being just kind of blown away. You had the band standing in front of this green American flag that would eventually turn into slime and cover them all.
Be an American idiot. Don't want a nation under the new media.
But the music shocked me and it galvanized me. I mean, I grew up in a fairly conservative town, a conservative Navy town. I went to a Christian school. The culture was conservative. While my immediate family at the time was fairly liberal, I didn't know a lot of people who thought that way. I mean, I didn't think you were even allowed to say things like this, like so explicit, so against the president, against the current administration and politics. It was exciting. I would describe Green Day as a gateway band, probably for me and for a lot of others. I didn't know Dead Kennedys or Black Flag, but this music helped me get there. And another thing about all this too is we just consumed music differently back then. Now you can kind of silo stuff off into media based on your beliefs. Back then, yeah, we had Fox News and MSNBC, but now you can really exist in your own hub. You don't have to be challenged or exposing to other people's views unless you want to. So we were all watching the same music videos, all listening to the same radio. But aside from maybe cable news, we were all listening to the same music on the same radio stations and watching the same music videos. And I remember going to school when this album came out thinking oh man, all my friends are going to hate this. They're going to be so mad about it. And I was completely wrong. Everybody loved it. Everyone I knew had this CD. I was baffled by it then, still a little baffled by it now. I remember talking to friends being like, are you looking at these lyrics? It says Sieg Heil to the President Gasman, bombs away is your punishment. You guys know what that means, right? And they're like, yeah, of course we know what he's talking about. We know who he's talking about. We just don't care. We like the music.
Sieg Heil to the President Gasman, bombs away is your punishment. Pulverize the Eiffel Towers, criticize your government.
That's something I do still find true today. You see conservative politicians who love Rage Against the Machine, for example. Brother, you are the machine. But it's also testament to just the songs were that good. These songs were catchy. They were inescapable. Green Day was operating at a extremely high level at this moment. And these songs were massive. I mean, American Idiot, for one, was great. But you also had Boulevard of Broken Dreams, which really rode that wave of emo music. Holiday, again, one of their more political songs that became a hit, really rambunctious and rowdy. Kind of gets into that playfulness that made people fall in love with Green Day in the first place. And of course, there's Wake Me Up When September Ends, which has been memed to death, but also became another pretty big ballad for the band.
Wake me up when September ends.
So how does this album hold up today? Well, first, musically, I will say it much better than I expected. I always loved this album when I was a kid, but I was a little afraid to be one of those things where you go back and watch a comedy from back then and you're like, oh man, I kind of wish I didn't watch this because it's really bad. It's kind of cringe. Didn't age well, but I think this actually aged surprisingly well, and not just for the politics. I think going in, I imagined this album would be a little self-serious, a little on the nose, a little pretentious for what they're going for. I mean, it's a punk rock opera. It kind of is all of those things, but it's just executed so well for the style of music that they're going for. I mean, you're doing a punk rock opera. Of course, it's going to be overindulgent. It's going to be overlong. All those criticisms are just kind of givens. Go listen to any rock opera, and you're going to find moments where you feel that. And actually, I appreciate the ambition of it. Usually, bands that do rock opera sort of things have really ornate instrumentation. There's strings and horns, and you're doing all these different things. But, Green Day's music is basically power chords. So you're pretty limited in what you can actually do with it. And that's where I think Billy Joe Armstrong's gift as a songwriter really comes into play. It's such a great sense of melody. He knows how to write a great song. And really, at the end of the day, that's all you need. The second song, Jesus of Suburbia, is one of the biggest swings on the record. It's a 9-minute multi-movement song. It's really just priming you for what's to come. I think that's the first test of the record. American Idiot is kind of this like prelude. This is where you really get the story. And I think it does it well. I think it could have failed miserably, and it doesn't. And once you get past that hump, this 9-minute epic, and it works, you can kind of coast and enjoy the rest of the record. It is really self-serious. I mean, the character is called the Jesus of Suburbia, but I think it's a lot of fun too. They really thread that line perfectly. I really had a lot of fun revisiting some of the deep cuts I haven't heard in a long time, like Extraordinary Girl. The closer, What's Her Name, is really gorgeous. It reminds me of their song Macy's Day Parade. I really love when they get that tenderness in their music. I had no idea Kathleen Hanna from Bikini Kill is on the song Letter Bomb. She does that "Nobody Likes You" bit.
Nobody likes you. Everyone left you. They're all out without you, having fun. I'm bored now. Can you comp it?
Yeah, no problem.
Well, good luck with your record.
You can never deny their punk rock credibility if you get Kathleen Hanna on your track. Thinking back on this and the time it came out, I do remember George W. Bush getting a lot of shit, his politics being maligned, being called a war criminal, all the goofy stuff, a shoe getting thrown at his head. Like, he was a pretty big target. Calling him an idiot felt really pointed and brazen. If you take that mentality and apply to someone like Donald Trump, ugh. Yeah, so obviously you've been getting my point of view this whole time. It's going to be even more present here. I think Donald Trump is obviously doing terrible things to our country. These ICE raids where children are being taken away from their parents and put in detention centers, American citizens being shot in the middle of the street and then being told that they didn't do anything wrong and they have immunity, is truly supremely fucked up. And that is just one example of many I could go into. And absolutely, I think artists should use their platform to speak out against injustice, to speak out against leaders. That's part of our First Amendment right. But with Trump, it's the same thing with a lot of comedy where I feel like it doesn't land. I mean, he is so goofy a lot of the times. He says weird things, weirder and stranger than even George W. Bush did. So when people, call him an idiot or call him Orange Man or whatever it is, it feels like the jokes are too obvious. And it also feels like it's not really getting to the darkness of what's going on. I think if Green Day were to put out an album called American Idiot today, it would maybe feel a little more cringe than it did then. I would go with something maybe like, to quote the man himself, like American Carnage. But the music itself holds up and is convicting. I was listening back to Letterbomb, and this line stuck out to me where he sings, "Where have all the riots gone as the city's motto gets pulverized?" And I just can't stop thinking about Minneapolis and what's going on there. And it is eerie and unsettling how much some of these lyrics do land today. All in all, I'm really feel grateful to have revisited this album, especially right now. Yes, it is on the nose. Yes, it is straightforward. Yes, it's kind of predictable in the point of view that it's coming across with, but I do appreciate the confidence and the spirit and the brashness of which they approach it. I hear Green Day is going to be opening up the Super Bowl next week, and I'm sure they're going to be on their best behavior. While I thought this album wouldn't age well, it actually feels more prescient than ever, and I would recommend revisiting. If you like this type of analysis of music, old and new, I do have a newsletter called Another Thought. You can find it over on Substack. That's Another Thought over on Substack. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for what's next in my CD case.